The iPhone 6 Plus represents one of the most pivotal moments in Apple's history. Released in September 2014, it wasn't just another annual upgrade, it was Apple finally giving in to a demand it had resisted for years. Bigger screens, more media consumption, a phone designed not just to be used, but to be lived on. Looking back more than a decade later, the iPhone 6 Plus sits at an interesting crossroads. It was revolutionary, controversial, wildly successful, and deeply flawed. To understand its legacy, you have to go back to what the iPhone was before it existed. For years, Apple stood firm on smaller displays. While competitors like Samsung pushed into oversized phones, Apple capped the iPhone at 4 inches with the iPhone 5 and 5S. Steve Jobs famously believed large phones were unwieldy and unnecessary, but by 2014, the market had spoken. Consumers wanted bigger screens, and Apple could no longer ignore it. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus were Apple's answer. The standard iPhone 6 introduced a 4.7-inch display, while the Plus model jumped all the way to 5.5 inches, a massive size at the time. The Plus model was often labeled a phablet, a term that sounds dated now, but back then it felt accurate. This was the first iPhone that genuinely felt big in your pocket. To accommodate these new sizes, Apple completely redesigned the iPhone. Gone were the sharp edges and glass-heavy construction of the iPhone 4 and 5 series. In their place came a thin, rounded aluminum body with curved edges and subtle antenna lines wrapping around the back. The design was controversial. Many people felt Apple traded character for comfort. Compared to the precision and visual contrast of the iPhone 5S, the iPhone 6 Plus looked softer, simpler, and arguably less premium. But in the hand, it told a different story. The rounded edges made it far more comfortable to hold, especially for long periods, and the thin profile gave it a futuristic feel in 2014. That thinness, however, came at a cost. The iPhone 6 series quickly became infamous for Bendgate, a controversy where some units would bend under pressure, particularly when carried in tight pockets. While only a small percentage of devices were affected, the story dominated headlines and damaged Apple's reputation for durability. In extreme cases, bending could lead to touch disease, where the display would register phantom inputs or stop responding altogether. Apple would quietly address these structural weaknesses the following year with the iPhone 6S by switching to stronger 7000 series aluminum, but for the iPhone 6 Plus, the damage was already done. Still, despite the controversy, the phone sold at an unprecedented scale. The iPhone 6 lineup went on to sell over 221 million units, making it the best-selling iPhone generation of all time. Clearly, consumers were willing to overlook the flaws. Part of that success came from the display itself. The iPhone 6 Plus featured a 5.5-inch IPS LCD with a 1080p resolution. In 2014, this was a significant leap for iPhones, which had never gone beyond 4 inches. Even today, the display holds up surprisingly well for basic use, though the large bezels instantly date it when compared to modern edge-to-edge designs. Apple also introduced software features specifically for the Plus model. Landscape mode on the home screen made the device feel almost tablet-like, and reachability, a gesture that pulled the interface downward, was Apple's clever solution to one-handed use on a large phone. It ran on Apple's A8 chip paired with just 1 GB of RAM, the same memory configuration as the iPhone 5S. At launch, performance was solid, but this decision would severely limit the phone's long-term lifespan. As apps grew more demanding, the lack of RAM became increasingly noticeable. Software support eventually ended with iOS 12 in 2018. While Apple does deserve credit for keeping the phone updated for several years, the gap between iOS 12 and today's iOS versions is enormous. Many modern apps no longer install, security updates are long gone, and compatibility issues are constant. Yet, interestingly, devices running original or early versions of iOS 8 tell a different story. An iPhone 6 Plus preserved on iOS 8 feels like a time capsule. The Helvetica new font, the old music app with cover flow, classic control center design, and subtle icon variations all reflect a transitional period in Apple software history. iOS 8 wasn't a visual overhaul like iOS 7, but it quietly introduced some of Apple's most important features. The 6 Plus featured an 8-megapixel rear camera, which even at launch wasn't groundbreaking. However, it gained optical image stabilization, an exclusive feature at the time. Video recording supported 1080p at 60 frames per second, along with slow-motion video at up to 240 frames per second, impressive specs in 2014. By modern standards, though, the camera setup feels extremely limited. A 1.2-megapixel front camera, no 4K video, and basic image processing make it clear this phone belongs to a different era. Even budget smartphones today outperform it easily. Battery life was one area where the 6 Plus truly shined. With a nearly 3,000 mAh battery, it offered excellent endurance at launch, especially compared to smaller iPhones. Over a decade later, battery health depends entirely on usage and replacements, but a well-preserved unit can still surprise you. So where does that leave the iPhone 6 Plus today? In practical terms, it doesn't make sense as a daily phone in 2025 or beyond. Software limitations, weak performance, outdated cameras, and missing modern features like water resistance, wireless charging, OLED displays, and high refresh rate make it hard to justify, even at low prices. The iPhone 6 Plus is incredibly important. It marked Apple's acceptance of large phones, reshaped Apple's design language for years, and became the foundation for everything from the iPhone 6s to the modern Mac-size iPhones we see today. It was Apple's biggest gamble and its biggest commercial success. For collectors and longtime Apple fans, especially those who remember unboxing one for the first time or watching Apple finally cross the 5-inch barrier, the iPhone 6 Plus is more than just old hardware. It's a reminder of a moment when Apple changed direction and the entire smartphone industry followed. And sometimes that legacy matters more than specs ever could.